Everybody, welcome back to another live at Divorce Workshop. I'm Karen Oman, and today we're going to talk to Rev G about why victims don't leave, the misconceptions. This is going to be a really great, informative conversation. For the whole month of January, it's full of lots of things. Also, we do talk about bullies as well in that workbook. Good morning.
Good morning. How are
Good.
you?
How are
Doing
you?
well, thank
Did
you.
you have a good holiday season?
We did. How about you?
Yeah, it went by fast as usual.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the busy holidays do go by quickly.
Yeah. So today, this is a really important topic because there's so many misconceptions when it comes to why victims don't leave. Um, I've had it myself,
hmm
but I've also, when I was younger, I had a friend that was in a terrible situation. And I'm going to be honest, we were like saying the same things that all society says, right? Like, why don't you just leave? I don't understand. If he hits you or whatever, just leave. So I'm just saying that years ago I did it and then I was in it and it's not that
Correct.
easy. So, right. So I would love your expert opinion on, first of all, before we go there, just give everyone a little bit of bio about yourself because you've got a wealth of education as well.
Sure. I think most important to all of these conversations is the fact that I myself am a survivor of more than 2 decades of abuse. I managed to escape that about a decade ago and realized that he could no longer control me. And I went back to school, had to finish my bachelor's degree to start with, and then I enrolled in a dual master's program. And I am currently enrolled in a PhD in social work program.
Mm-hmm.
Every opportunity that I have had, I have studied, researched, and done homework assignments that are informative for the conversation about domestic violence. And I think that has added the the research and professional side to the personal experience that
Mm-hmm.
I have.
Which really brings your expertise because when you have both, and I think you also have what I love about you is you have the passion, right,
Mm,
to help. And we need more awareness about this because it's so common, right? And I also want to mention that, like in my case, it wasn't physical violence. It was all the other stuff, that coercive control, financial abuse, neglect, that type of thing.
hmm
So it we've talked about that before, as in domestic violence is not just physical;
Right.
it's more than that. But so so let's talk about some of the, like I have a whole list of things I wrote about, but you're the expert. But what are some of the top misconceptions that you find that I know society has a lot of them. So what are your first thoughts about that?
Um, I have a whole list as well about, why a victim doesn't just leave. I think one of the things is I see this a lot, particularly in people of faith. They think that loyalty means tolerating mistreatment, or that somehow they will be stronger in their faith if they can stay and endure the suffering. So I think that there's a lot of fear that goes into leaving and staying. Financial dependence is a reason that a lot of victims can't leave. In my case, he had made me drop out of school. I wasn't allowed to work. So when you do finally leave, you don't have that education and work experience that you need to get a decent job. If you have a bunch of kids like I did, that makes it really hard.
Mm-hmm.
Coercive control, you mentioned that a few minutes ago. That makes it really hard to leave because you don't understand what you're living with, or you have this underhanded uh, person trying to tell you crazy things about yourself or about the relationship.
Mm-hmm.
Shame,
Yeah.
false hope that the perpetrator will change, denial about what you're living with. And that, unfortunately, we can put on society. Society might tell you if it's only verbal or emotional abuse that it's really not that bad.
Yeah, I was in when I went to my lawyers finally after, I think I told you last time, I think it took me 5 times to get out. But I went to the lawyers and he said, "So have you been hit?" And I said, "No," and I started explaining and he's like, "I don't need that."
Mm,
So it was just like, okay. So I was just kind of So I'm also wondering if the legal aspect of like law enforcement, but as also well as lawyers, and that also can also um, be challenging for domestic violence survivors as well.
Absolutely. And I'm not sure that's gotten any easier. I think in my state, we've seen a shift to more of a father's rights state in the last decade. And that makes it really scary because people are losing custody to people who have perpetrated violence against them and their children. So, a fear of family court
Hmm.
or a need to stay to protect your children, I get that. That is why I stayed personally. I thought that I could protect the kids if I stayed. Unfortunately, the kids see more, hear more, experience more, know more than you think they do. So
Hmm.
even like I thought I was trying to be that barrier between him and them. So even I thought I was absorbing the abuse myself. And unfortunately, you don't absorb as much as you think you are, and your kids are still experiencing it.
Yeah, read recently in a scholarly article about children, and they need to have be really receptive of their environment when they're young because that's kind of how survival is with children, right? Like they need. So you're saying that they pick up on a lot. They do. They do.
Yes.
And I understand that when you're saying like the buffer, because I did it too. I thought, okay, it's better if I'm here because I can buffer with all his
Hmm.
strange behaviors and manipulations. But you're right. Like there's a cost to that as well, right? Like your children know more than you think they do.
Yeah. And that's really hard once you get out, because then you carry an additional grief or guilt
Hmm.
about, man, why didn't I leave sooner?
Hmm.
But the problem is, like for me and for so many others, it's probably not possible to leave a whole lot sooner than you do. And I think that's why so many survivors have stories about, oh, it took me 3 times or 5 times or 7 times or 11 times to try to get away for good, because until you hit that final time,
Hmm.
it is so hard to get out. I saw this saying about the time I left, and this was very true for me, and I know it's been true for some of my friends. A victim of domestic violence leaves when the fear of staying is greater than the fear of leaving.
Hmm. Hmm. It's so true. It's so true. Yeah. I do find, I don't know about you or your friends or clients, but I knew strongly intuitively that the post-divorce abuse was just going to be terrible as well. Like I had a real like my whole nervous system was all worked up for years after, and rightly so in some regards, right? So the post-divorce abuse, even when you do leave, nothing changes. Like really it changes because you're out of that space and you're a little bit better because things, but their abuse can continue.
Absolutely.
And that's another thing that can kind of make people return, right? Like they can get sucked back into that.
Absolutely. Your fear of the family court system or
Hmm.
your lack of ability to provide for yourself and your children, uh, those things can just drive you right back. And understandably so. If you are facing homelessness,
Hmm.
you might choose to go back for a time until you can get your feet under you. And that's completely understandable.
Yeah. How about the abuse by proxy? That seems to happen a lot as well, right? So my mother, I'm not really sure, they were only married 6 years, but it was a very difficult, high conflict divorce, and he used the court system to get my older sister,
Mm.
and they didn't see each other for 10 years or so. So it's a really, really awful story, but I think it's really quite more common than we think
Absolutely.
with this type of behavior because they need to give that give that their ex more pain. Or do you know the motive for why they do that? Like is it just control?
I believe that a lot of it is control, right? They lose control of their victim when the victim leaves. So they find other means to control the victim. And the court is huge
Hmm.
because if you have to split custody with your perpetrator, if the custody flips and goes to the abuser, which I've heard in more stories than I can even count, it's just tragic. Yes, that's a huge fear.
Yeah, so that would make anyone like myself and others just stay because at
Hmm.
least, at least we're all, in the same roof and we have a roof,
Yes.
right? And we have food. Um, so are there any other misconceptions that come up more common or not so common even, right? Because
Sure. I think the abuser's influence in the community can be one. What if your perpetrator is a physician or a
uh,
lawyer or
mhm,
a judge or a community planner? When the position of the perpetrator is of higher influence in the community, they are more likely to be believed than the victim or the survivor. So that can create a lot of issues. There are cultural issues.
mhm.
Maybe the person is an immigrant, doesn't speak the language well. Maybe the person identifies in the LGBTQ community and is going to be outed if they share their experience. Maybe they're disabled. Disabled individuals and even elderly individuals have high statistics for
Oh, really?
abuse. And that's tragic because what if you are disabled and you depend on your perpetrator's health insurance for care, right? So
Mm-hmm.
that makes it
Good
really
point.
hard to leave. Maybe your expensive medications won't be covered if you leave. Maybe the medical care that you receive you'll will end if you leave. So I think
Wow.
that that can be an
Mm-hmm.
issue. Lack of knowledge. People who live in rural areas don't have as many options for help. So maybe what little help does exist, the victim or the survivor doesn't know
I was also
that
thinking
it
just
does.
just to interrupt you for a minute there is like resources. So one
Yes.
of the things here that I hear all the time is, well, you can just go to the shelter, you can just get resources. Well, I don't know about down in Texas where you are, but up in Canada here, we have some, but we don't have a lot. And a lot of times I've worked with someone and it's the shelter was full. Like the
Mm-hmm.
women's shelter was full. So she's like, well, where am I going to go? Right. So it's not so easy because I was just saying like the resources are not always plentiful.
Right.
So especially when you're in a rural area, it's even harder, right, to even get there if you don't have a car because they do like to try to isolate you, right? Where you stay at home and don't talk to anybody. That's one thing. But I was just about to mention, like, it's sometimes resources and finding the shelters or women's shelters, or having family that actually believe you,
Yeah.
right? That right, because that's also true. But sorry to interrupt your list there, but
Oh, no. I think you're hitting that nail right on the head. I serve on the board of directors for my local family violence shelter, and we're a shelter that serves a six-county area. So if you live in one of the rural counties that surround us, you may not know that the shelter
mhm,
exists. You may not be able to get to the shelter, as you stated, and it could be a 2-hour drive to get to the shelter. How are you going to do that when there's no rural transit?
yeah,
So I
just makes
think
it
that's
really
a
hard.
huge issue. Absolutely. Pets are a
Yeah.
big
Hmm.
reason why survivors don't leave. And that could be a couple things. One, you may have an emotional support animal that you can't take to the shelter because very few shelters are equipped to have pets along with their human people. And you may fear what will happen to your pets
Hmm.
if you leave.
Yeah.
Either one of those makes it really hard to leave a beloved pet behind.
Yeah. I thought there was some change in movement with that. I thought there were some shelters now. I mean, women's shelters that were opening up to pets.
Hmm.
I'm hoping that's more because for me, who've always had pets, they're part of my family. So it would be it would almost be impossible for me to leave them behind. So
Yes.
I could see that being a reason to stay. Yeah, that's a good point too. Yeah,
Yeah, fewer than 20% of shelters have pet shelters,
yeah.
as far as I understand.
Hmm.
The same shelter that I'm on the board, we are hoping to build a shelter this year
Oh,
for
that'd be
pets.
great. That'd be
So
great.
that was something that was really important to us, and we have plans in place to do that this year. But the shelter has existed for 40 years. So it's a long time to exist without that extra piece of being able to have someone's pet come with them. And again, when we talk about pets, we're mostly talking about cats and dogs, right? But this is a shelter that serves rural areas. What do you do
Hmm.
if you have horses,
Exactly.
right?
Hmm. Yeah.
Goats,
Yeah.
rabbits, chickens.
Yeah.
What do you do with them?
Yeah. It's a big question, but the more advocacy done, the better we can get some of these problems solved, right? Like
Absolutely.
we definitely need to do more in this field. Um, it's been I used to work at a food bank years and years ago, and I saw so much.
Mm,
Um, and I don't think it's getting any better, right? Like more advocacy and more education's out there, right? And there's more resources, but there's still a long way to go.
yeah, absolutely.
Is there anything else on your list? Otherwise, I want to bring up a topic that,
Go for it.
yeah. So victims that so what's it called? Secondary victimization. I was thinking about talking about. So you leave, and then your friends are like, that's great, your family. But then you go back, and then they sit and yap about how, like, are you stupid? Why are you going back? That's so, so then you go back. So this happened to a friend of mine. Then you go back, and all the friends that you had are just don't even talk to you anymore,
Mhm.
or are so disappointed that you went back. And then that person that went back, they're even more isolated because they can't talk to anybody about it anymore. I'm sure you know about this, but I just want to bring it up.
Yeah, I think that there can be sometimes personal struggles for the survivor. That could be anything from needing like therapy to taking meds for a mental health
Hmm.
diagnosis, and that might cause the person to go back and forth a couple times. Again, maybe they need the
Hmm.
perpetrator's health
Hmm.
insurance to cover the therapy visits or the medication. And then the abuser uses that
Hmm.
against them in court,
Hmm.
right? Oh, well, she has a mental health diagnosis. This is the whole problem. And then tries to use that in a custody battle. So I think that that can sometimes feed into what you
Hmm.
described about getting out, going back, getting out, going back. I know someone who did go back and stayed there for a number of years longer and then finally did get out. And I think that there is some guilt and shame attached to going back. But I also really, if anyone's listening who has friends or family members who's gone back and had the struggle about whether to stay or whether to leave, I think the person needs to be 100% supportive across the board. Don't
Hmm.
give up on your friend or family member. Be there for them when they come back out.
Yeah,
It
that's
is
really
so
important.
important.
Do
The support is so needed.
do you often find though the perpetrators also will enable, or they'll go around and they'll try to get the family and the friends to all, like, I don't know, she should come back,
Oh,
and I don't know what that's called. Is it flying monkeys or
yes.
whatever, where they're trying to, like, we had a perfect house, and we have this great life, and I can't believe they left, and then so that family and the friends encourage the person to go back. I know that they've done that. I know that happened to me, so I'm just wondering if that's pretty
Yeah.
common.
The external pressure from family, friends, local community, a faith-based
Mhm.
community or a church, there can be a lot of external pressure to go back or to hold it all together. And that's not helpful either. The support systems need to be there 100% for the person who has experienced harm
Yeah,
and not prop up the perpetrator.
yeah, which seems to still happen.
It does. It
Yeah.
does. And flying monkeys is the term. And that comes from Wizard of Oz and the flying monkeys in that, the film or the book or the play, whatever version you've seen or read. But it's an adequate term because the perpetrator can recruit these harmful people to put pressure on the survivor.
Yeah, and then if you're a survivor who, like I myself, had very, very low self-esteem. Like I remember I would lay in bed and say, I don't even think I could work at a variety store. Like and that was someone who had a degree
Mhm.
and a college diploma. And I was all this person before I married, and then it all just got, so I had absolutely no self-esteem. So you try to have absolutely no self-esteem, and then you're trying to escape, right, and get out of a marriage. So um, I think one of the things is I didn't know what I know now. I think resources would have been important for me back then. I had some support, but is there any tips on that? Like, should they, if anyone's going to watch later on a YouTube or whatever, is there anything like that people should be try to prepare, like reach out, because that's risk taking too. Because if they look in your computer or like, is there any advice you have for that?
Definitely assume that the perpetrator is watching, reading, observing everything, right? So if you do think you need to reach out to another person for help, don't do it on a shared computer. Don't do it when someone else has access to your phone and can read your text messages, because that could escalate the abuse and create additional forms of harm. So you would want to do that in some sort of secretive way. I think that that is so important to protect yourself.
Yeah, I had no idea that that would happen, right? So I think somehow, you know, educating yourself somehow, getting the type of the support systems and finding the right type of support system, right? Like hopefully a family member who's seen it believes you, and that can really help.
Yeah, I would say don't waste your time, so to speak, on somebody who's not supportive, because you could talk all day and try to explain yourself and get their support. And if they're not going to support you, or if they're going to support your perpetrator, it's not going to help you. It's not going to help your mental well-being. It's not going to help your children. Find the person who will 100% believe and support you, and that person may know other resources that you have access to. One of the people I first reached out to told me about my local shelter and gave me gas money to get there. And that was very helpful. I may not have made that connection had someone not kind of urged me that direction.
Yeah. So it's finding the right support system is definitely going to be helpful rather than listening to the ones that are not helpful.
Because they will make you doubt yourself even
Hmm.
further. As you
Hmm.
said, we already probably have low self esteem. We've been so beaten down,
Hmm.
whether physically or emotionally, over years that we doubt so much of what we do anyway. We don't need somebody else putting
Hmm.
additional pressure and doubt upon us and making us second guess our every move.
Yeah, and I just want to give another tip there is when you're looking for a lawyer, or just make sure that that lawyer isn't putting you down as well.
Hmm.
Because I went to a lawyer, and I've heard this from others, and it was intimidating. It wasn't a supportive type of lawyer going, yes, I understand, I've got you, we're going to get through this. It was more like intimidating, where I was so nervous to go see him, and I'm thinking, why am I so nervous to see my own lawyer? Like, this is my lawyer, right? And I've already dealing with the toxic, abusive ex. I don't really want to, so it's just another pointer. Just be careful that that you get a lawyer that really one that you trust, but also one that doesn't make you feel small or belittle you or stuff like that.
Yeah, I had a lawyer who did believe me and did believe in me,
Mm.
but also said that I educated him about domestic violence along the way.
See,
At
good
the
point
end of the
too.
case, he said, I learned so much from you.
Yeah.
And that was a mark of humility to me, to say those words to me, a
Mm-hmm.
survivor, somebody at the time who didn't have education. So that meant a lot.
Yeah. So if you get someone like that, you could also do what you did, which you've changed his view or her view, and now she or they can help many more others, right? Hmm.
Exactly. How much more equipped is that attorney to help others in the future once they have that understanding of domestic
True.
violence?
Is there any other tips you want to say, or anything about more about this topic before we wrap up?
I think we've hit on so
Yeah, it's
many
so great.
different
It was so good.
topics. Yeah, I think that it's so important that survivors know that it's rare that a perpetrator will change for good.
Yeah, no.
It's, you can go back a dozen times, and all the love and all the devotion in the world is not going to change a person who doesn't want to change.
Yeah, I 100% agree. And that itself takes a while to radically accept, the radical acceptance theory, and
Yeah.
it takes a long time. It's taken me quite a while to understand that. But once you radically accept of who they are, and that takes some work, but yeah, they'll never change. And it is hard you know, to understand that when you're in it and when you're out of it. I had it for some reason. I had this naive thinking, well, okay, once we're out, he'll be better. Honestly, this is the truth. I was so naive, right? And I think it's pretty common, right? I see it with some clients where they're like, oh no, they're going to be better, and you have to gently just say in a way that probably not, right? So, anyways, yeah.
Yeah. Unfortunately, they seldom want to get the help that's needed in order to make that permanent change. They've had that harmful existence serve them well
Hmm.
for so many years that few people want to give that up,
Yeah.
which is tragic, right? It's tragic that society supports that rather than supporting, let's have healthy individuals. In this case, we're mostly talking men. Let's have a society that supports healthy men so that we don't
Hmm.
continue to perpetrate violence, whether it's physical or emotional or verbal or spiritual, on women and children.
I think I have you on next week as well, but I wouldn't mind if you would come on and we could talk about where it stems from, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because I think it's important, because how they're being made into this, right? Like, you know what I mean? Like this, we're born with some personality, right? But how are these behaviors formulated during childhood? Is it because they've witnessed it? Probably, right? But
Yeah, that's a
anyways,
part of it.
yeah, if you'd like to come back on for another time, I'd like, because it's like the cycle keeps repeating themselves, right? And
Yes.
so I'm just wondering where that's a big topic. But anyways, it just was
It
like,
is a big topic, and it's one that doesn't get addressed enough
mhm,
because I think society generally sees homes as these private places, and we're not going to reach into someone's home
mhm,
and tell them how to raise their children. Well, unfortunately, we're not correcting harmful messages, and they're
mhm.
just being perpetuated from one generation to the
Yeah,
next.
yeah. So let me know if you want to talk about that, because I think it would be a really informative conversation, because, you know, I saw it in the food bank. It was just,
Right.
repetitive. It was like, so the cycle was never breaking, you know? So
Yeah.
anyways, but it was
Yeah.
great. If anyone have any questions, put in the comment. Otherwise, it was, as usual, it was great to have you on.
It was good to
Love
talk
your,
with you again.
yeah, I love, you're so, well resourced in this area, and I learned from you, and I hope other people learn from you as well. And you want to mention your books before you go?
Sure. I have two books out. One is called Never Ever After: How Recognizing Red Flags in Relationships Can Save You a Whole Lot of Grief. And in that book, I kind of juxtapose red flags with green flags so that you can see the difference between healthy and toxic relationships, and then address a bunch of yellow flags so that people can look at those questionable moments. Because red flags, people tend to be a
Hmm.
little more aware of. Yellow flags, not so much. Like, what do we do with this other item that might be toxic but might not be toxic? I think I can love it out of him, that kind of thing. So that book that
Hmm.
book addresses that. And then I also have Taking It Seriously, which is a faith leader's guide to domestic violence. Both are available on Amazon.
Great. Those are great resources. Great resources.
Thank you.
All right. Well, thanks, and have a great rest of your day. And thank you, everybody, and take care.
You too.
Okay.
Bye bye.
Bye bye.